There's been lots of conversation over the last few days, and I don't know why it's taken this long for people to realise Blood DK is really overpowered. If you haven't already seen the great story about Riani and his cloth adventures as a Blood DK, then you can check that out on Wowhead. He is the DK Guide class writer now, and he's a friend of the podcast. He's been on a couple of times now. But I feel like this has actually finally shown people just how overpowered Blood DK is. Not just how overpowered Blood DK is itself, but also how underrepresented the other tanks are. Now, we knew before Cata even launched that we was going to be running Blood DK and Feral tanks, and the vast majority of raid groups would be doing the same, because Blood DK is quite literally unrivaled when it comes to main tanking. Arguably, even as an off-tank, Blood DKs are really, really strong. Now, while I actually think something should have been done about this a long time ago, and it shouldn't have waited until Firelands is just round the corner, it really would make the rest of Cataclysm really interesting if they was to do something not too wild, and I think I might have the solution. Now, once Firelands is actually out next week, myself and Subtle, if you don't know Subtle, check his YouTube channel out in the description below. He plays every single tank in every single version of World of Warcraft, basically. So we're going to get together and discuss this. He's going to have his own ideas, but I just wanted to float mine now, so you guys in the comments can let me know whether you think it's crazy, absolutely not worth doing, or it's a good idea. Do you know what I mean? Just so I can gauge your thoughts going into that conversation with Subtle. I know I harp on about it a lot, but Mr. Pandaria is inevitably going to be announced in a few days' time at Warcraft Direct. So my idea to balance these tanks, or at least make the tanks that are not Blood DKs feel fun, is to actually borrow some things from Mr. Pandaria. And that's because it would be really cool for prop paladins and prop warriors, and even guardian druids to a certain extent, to actually be able to have some fun and kind of warm up to how they're going to be tanking in the next expansion. And to be fair, the solution to it is very, very easy. So starting with the actual problem, which isn't really a problem, because actually the way DK's tank now is exactly what inspired Blizzard to change the way all the tanks work in Mr. Pandaria. But the fact is, Death Knights have got massive self-heals, massive absorb shields that they can stack, and obviously put out a lot of damage as well. If you've been doing these Inferno dungeons and you've happened to have a DK tank in, you'll know as well as I do that the DKs most of the time are not only topping damage meters, but they're kind of making the healer feel like they don't need to do a great deal of healing, at least to the tank. And I don't actually think there's anything wrong with that if all the other tanks could do the same thing. Every tank will need some way to be able to reliably self-heal to take pressure off the healers and inherit that more Mist of Pandaria tanking style, and then some sort of active mitigation, whether this is damage reduction or absorb or just whatever. The way I would solve this problem is purely with a glyph. One single glyph for prop warrior, one single glyph for paladin, and if you wanted to adjust druid, because I think druid is the one that probably needs the least attention, but I'll tell you what I would do anyway, and that would be glyph based as well. Now, currently as a prop paladin, you're likely running glyph of Shield of Righteous. Now, Shield of Righteous is actually what plays a big part in terms of mitigation when it comes to Mist of Pandaria. When you use your Shield of Righteous, it's going to give you 3 seconds of physical damage reduction. Now, 3 seconds isn't long, but in MOP, you're generating a lot more holy power than you are in Cata. So what I would do is change Glyph of Shield of Righteous that is in Cataclysm at the moment, where all it does is increases Shield of Righteous damage by 10%, and add in the MOP Shield of Righteous effect to this glyph. So you can remove the 10% damage reduction completely, and then have it so what it actually does is when you use Shield of Righteous, it's going to reduce your physical damage taken by 30% for 6 seconds, so we'll be doubling it from Mist of Pandaria. It also will have the effect Bastion of Glory. In MOP, what this does is increases the strength of your Word of Glory when used to heal yourself by 10%, and it stacks 5 times. So I would have the glyph do exactly the same thing. So it's going to give you 30% damage reduction when you use Shield of Righteous. The dog's walking around all over the place. Go out and get some air. Sorry about that. And then what it's also going to do is A, remove the global cooldown from Word of Glory and remove its cooldown completely. And then B, obviously 10% extra heal with it for every time you use Shield of Righteous, stacking 5 times. That one glyph solves prop paladin. Done. You've got a big ability that when you use it, you're going to reduce your physical damage, which means you can control your incoming damage a lot more. And you're going to be able to, if you need a heal, you're going to be able to use Word of Glory because it will no longer be on the cooldown just for prop paladins. And of course, you'll be saving that big 5-stacked Word of Glory for when you really need it. Now, that might seem like a lot of changes for one glyph, but quite honestly, it's only really affecting 2 abilities, Shield of Righteous, Word of Glory, and it's all just on one glyph. that would be Prop Paladin solved. The good thing about this as well is it's really going to get you into the swing of how you're going to tank as a Prop Paladin when it comes to Mr. Pandaria as well. The only difference in MOP, you're going to generate a lot more holy power, and not just that, you're also going to get procs like Divine Purpose, where you get a free 3 holy power Shield of Righteous, things like that. So you can actually generate those 5 stacks for Word of Glories a lot quicker. It'll be a lot slower in Cata, but it'd still be a big improvement from where you are at the moment. Warrior, very similarly to Paladin, you're probably using Glyph of Shield Slam at the moment, which increases the damage of Shield Slam by 10%. Now, again, you would need a 2-part change to this as well. In MOP, as a prop warrior, you've got Shield Block and Shield Barrier. Now, Shield Block is for physical, really, and Shield Barrier is more for magic damage mitigation. Because Shield Block, of course, is what you're going to want to be keeping up because it blocks all normal melee attacks. The main difference is in MOP, Shield Block is on a 9-second cooldown and has 2 charges. So you're really able to use this when you really need it, obviously. And you can pretty much use it 4 times back to back before you need to wait for it to start actually recharging, where you've got none at all. But then you've got Shield Barrier, which is actually probably the one I'm more interested in terms of Cataclysm, because it just absorbs X amount of damage based on the amount of rage you use, up to 60 rage. Now, I would use this. I wouldn't worry about Shield Block. I'd keep Shield Block the same way as it is and have Warrior more based around the absorb. So I would change the Shield Slam glyph to also give you Shield Barrier. So when you actually use this glyph, you're going to learn Shield Barrier. Have it exactly the same as it is in MOP, where it's just a 1.5 second cooldown, and the more rage you use, the bigger the absorb. But then I would also have Shield Slam to have a percentage chance to reset the cooldown of Victory Rush. So if we was to work with something like a 50% chance to reset, or even a 30% chance to reset, this means you, like DKs and Prop Paladins, if they made the changes and added the glyph I'm talking about, you would also have a reliable absorb that you can put up whenever you need it, and you're going to be able to use Victory Rush a lot, doing lots and lots of self-healing. I honestly don't think you need much more changes than that. You could go as far as getting the MOP version of Shield Block as well. You could use like Glyph of Blocking or something like that and change that so it changes Shield Block to the MOP version, but I actually think the Absorb Shield would be a bit more fun and probably fit better into Cataclysm the way the tanks are. And then, as I say, having that chance to reset Victory Rush with Glyph of Shield Slam, I mean, you're going to be doing pretty good self-healing, reliable absorbs, and you'll probably feel like a DK. And then when it comes to the Druid, quite honestly, the Druid is actually in a really good place. Maybe not so much a good place when we talk about feral DPS, but in terms of actually tanking, I mean, you can do a lot of things a Blood DK can do because you do have quite reliable absorb shields up from your mastery. The only thing is the self-healing, really, that you miss. So what I would actually do is change Glyph of Frenzied Regen. Now, while that would probably be missed, because Glyph of Frenzied Regen is a good personal cooldown, just to help your healers be able to top you off quick during big damage. But if you actually change this so Frenzied Regen works basically the same as what we was looking at with Warriors with Shield Barrier, instead it's a heal. So up to 60 rage can be consumed, and then it heals you for X amount based on the amount of rage used. And quite honestly, that would be Druid completely finished, and that's a very minor glyph to put in. I mean, that's just my thoughts. I'd love to know your thoughts, and as I say, I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with Subtle later on next week, where we actually really dig into the details of what the positives and negatives would be of each change, and what he would change, what I would change, maybe come to something in between, and who knows, Blizzard may listen and make all tanks as powerful as DKs. But I think this way would be quite cool because it gives every tank some form of absorb / damage reduction and a way to reliably heal, like self-heal as well. We know at the moment Blizzard are listening and they are really making positive changes, and they've been making more and more positive changes over the last couple of weeks. So let's hope they see this and start to show some love to the tanks. And quite honestly, if they just implemented these exact changes, I'd probably be interested in playing Prop Paladin, but my Paladin stays as Rat and Holy until Prop Paladin actually feels useful. Sorry, Prop Paladins, don't hate me. I love Prop Paladin, but while it's like not a Blood DK, I don't see the point. But anyway, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.